Stanislav Petrov. It was September 26, 1983. The Cold War was still burning and tensions between the US and the Soviet Union were sky high. Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet air defense officer, was working the night shift at a bunker just outside of Moscow, monitoring the early warning system for incoming missile attacks. Then the alarm went off. According to the system, 5 American nuclear missiles had just been launched toward the Soviet Union. The standard procedure? Immediate retaliation, also known as mutually assured destruction. Push the button, launch a counterattack and trigger nuclear war. But Petrov didn't follow the script. Something didn't sit right with him. Only 5 missiles? That didn't make sense. If the US was starting a nuclear war, why wouldn't they go all in? They had thousands of those missiles after all. He suspected the system was wrong, so instead of alerting his superiors and escalating the situation, he reported it as a false alarm. And he was right. The system had malfunctioned. There were no missiles. In a single moment, Petrov prevented what could have been a full-scale global nuclear war just by keeping a cool head and using basic common sense. Sir Alexander Fleming. In 1928, Alexander Fleming was working in his lab at St. Mary's Hospital in London. He was studying bacteria, specifically a nasty kind called Staphylococcus. But Fleming wasn't exactly known for keeping a tidy workspace. When he returned from vacation, he noticed something weird. One of his Petri dishes had been contaminated by a bit of mold. Normally, that would be an oops moment. Toss the plate, start over. But instead of cleaning it up, Fleming took a closer look. He saw that around the mold, the bacteria had disappeared. The mold was doing something the scientists couldn't, killing bacteria. That mold turned out to be Penicillium notatum, and what Fleming had stumbled on was the world's first antibiotic. It took another decade of additional research and wartime funding to turn penicillin into the miracle drug we know today. Before penicillin, even a small cut could turn deadly. Surgery was a huge gamble, and diseases like pneumonia and syphilis were basically death sentences. Antibiotics changed all of that. So if you've ever had an infection and survived, thank Alexander Fleming. And maybe also thank the mold. Norman Borlaug. Borlaug was an American agronomist, and through decades of tireless research, he developed new, high-yield, disease-resistant crops that transformed agriculture in developing countries. This became known as the Green Revolution, a period where food production skyrocketed in places like Mexico, India, and Pakistan. These countries were on the brink of famine. Borlaug's wheat helped feed them. In fact, it's estimated that his work saved over 1 billion lives from hunger. He didn't ask for fame, and he rarely showed up in headlines. When he won the Nobel Peace Prize, he gave most of the credit to farmers and field workers. Just a quiet scientist who spent his life trying to make sure people didn't die from starvation. In a world where people oftentimes patent and overpriced life-saving medicine, Norman Borlaug actually cared about human lives. James Harrison. In the 1950s, Australia was facing a deadly problem. Thousands of newborns were dying every year from a condition called rhesus disease. It's a complication that happens when a mother's blood type attacks her unborn baby's blood cells. The results were tragic: miscarriages, stillbirths, or babies born with severe brain damage. Doctors didn't have reliable treatment until James Harrison, an ordinary man from Australia, came along. Turns out Harrison had an extremely rare antibody in his blood that could prevent this condition. So doctors used it to create a treatment called Anti-D, and it worked. Over the course of his life, James Harrison donated blood over 1,100 times. He did it almost every week for 60 years. His donations are estimated to have helped save more than 2.5 million babies. When he made his final donation at age 81, Australia's Red Cross held a national tribute. Henrietta Lacks. In 1951, Henrietta Lacks went to Johns Hopkins Hospital for cancer treatment. She was a 31-year-old mother of 5. While doctors tried to treat her, they also took a small sample of her cancer cells without asking her or telling her. Up until then, scientists had been trying to grow human cells in labs, but the cells always died off after a few days. Henrietta's didn't. Her cells kept growing. These cells, now known as HeLa cells, became the first human cells that could survive and reproduce outside the body indefinitely. Since then, they've been used in over 75,000 medical studies. They helped develop the polio vaccine, treatments for cancer, AIDS research, gene mapping, and even COVID-19 vaccines. Chances are, if you've ever benefited from modern medicine in general, Henrietta Lacks played a part in that. But here's the part that's hard to swallow. Neither Henrietta nor her family were ever informed or compensated. For decades, her contribution was anonymous. Millions were made from her cells, while her descendants couldn't afford basic healthcare in America. It took over 60 years for her name to be widely recognized. Alan Turing. During World War II, the Nazis used a complex encryption machine called Enigma. It could generate millions of code combinations, and breaking it was considered impossible. Turing, a British mathematician and cryptanalyst, didn't just break it. He built a machine that could do it automatically. Historians estimate that Turing's work helped shorten the war by as much as 2 to 4 years and saved millions of lives. But here's the tragic part. After the war, Turing wasn't honored. He was arrested for being gay, which was illegal in Britain at the time. Instead of receiving medals, he was chemically castrated by the government. He died 2 years later, likely by his own choice. It took more than half a century for the British government to apologize. In 2013, he was given a royal pardon, and in 2017, his face was chosen to appear on the £50 banknote. Thanks for watching. See the video on your screen. Well, YouTube thinks this one might interest you as well, so go ahead and check it out if you like.